Welcome everyone. We haven't done some of these Wednesday webinars in quite some time, but have some special guests with us today. And thinking about today's presentation, and after speaking with one of our presenters 4 weeks ago, I kept coming and circling back to the pandemic and COVID and really just how the public views government performance during the pandemic. I think all of us can be a little bit skeptical of government. I'm certainly a little bit always dissatisfied with some of the service and what I see at the federal level, but because I'm a county guy, I think everything that counties do is spot on. But if we think about, although we're starting to normalize a little bit, and folks are getting vaccinated. If you think about what we went through, which was hard to even imagine, kind of where we were last March and April. But we had school closures, we had community parks closing, we had some businesses that closed either temporarily or permanently. You've got folks that are remote working. My office is still working remotely. Of course, you had unemployment, all the unemployment compensation problems. You had evictions or some delayed evictions. Even here locally, they're talking about, the possibility if people haven't paid their power bill, whether or not they're going to shut that off. So there's just been, I think, a lot of stuff that's happened. And on balance, I think the local governments have responded fairly well. And this was all unanticipated. And so I think on balance, did a pretty good job. But it really raises the question: what does the public think? How do residents in your communities, how do they think they were and continue to be served by the local government? And I think probably any county that believes in accountability and wants to do the best job that it can needs that kind of feedback loop from the community. That they need to know what that customer experience is, both from a quantitative perspective, but also from a qualitative perspective. And so today we're gonna get into how communities can actually do that, and really with some basic technology applications. And so with us today we have representatives from a company called Qualtrics, and I think at the heart of Qualtrics is they are kind of a data analytics company. Just to kind of cut through some of the nomenclature. And then we also have someone who uses this tool down in Miami-Dade. His name is Adam Mullins. And so first, let me just go ahead and introduce Timon Weiler, and he can introduce his guests and the other presenters, and I'll just let you take it from here. If folks have questions, put them in the chat or in the Q&A function. And as always, we will edit this video and the slides, and we'll post them to the website later. So if someone that's on your team didn't get an opportunity to watch it, they can watch it at a later time. So Timon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Eric. Can you hear me and see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. Well, hey, thanks so much for that introduction. I agree with everything that Eric said. What we'll talk about today is a few ways that we've seen Qualtrics used during a pandemic like COVID, as well as outside of a pandemic, right? And so what we're thinking in terms of agenda today is we'll run through brief introductions here. I'll introduce my team. I'll provide kind of a 2-minute overview of Qualtrics, who we are, what we do, and who we work with. And then my colleague Vince is going to walk through a few modernization trends in government that we've seen, especially that have been impacted and changed in the past year or so. And then we'll pass it over to Adam from Miami-Dade County. He's going to walk through a few specific ways that they use Qualtrics at the county. And as Becky mentioned in the chat, please feel free throughout the presentation to send in questions in the chat or in the Q&A Zoom function, and we'll have plenty of time at the end to get to those. I also, before we dive in, just want to say thanks. I know you've probably been on like 1,000 webinars since the beginning of the pandemic. And so we appreciate you being here with us today. So to run through quick introductions, my name is Timon Weiler. I'm an account executive with Qualtrics. I work specifically with government entities there in Florida. Here in just a moment, I'll talk through some of the ones that we work with, but that's me. Vince, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll pass it over to Adam?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Vince Vu. I am the government industry advisor for Qualtrics. Before coming to Qualtrics, spent 15 years in government, right, doing the work that y'all are doing day in and day out at the state, local, and county level. So I'm happy to be here and talk a little bit about some of the greater trends that we're seeing in government.
And I'm Adam Mullins. I'm the Strategic Initiatives Manager for the Department of Communications and Customer Experience in Miami-Dade County. I help provide all the tools to our teams to help communicate with our residents in a more one-to-one way. So direct communications help humanize government and bidirectional, so they can communicate with us in a one-to-one method, and we can direct communicate with our residents, citizens, visitors, or businesses.
Thanks, Adam. I think it's also worth noting Adam's pre-pandemic profile picture that you can see on the screen and his post-pandemic beard that you can see on his live Zoom camera. So Adam took full advantage of quarantine. So pretty cool. Well, hey, quick overview of Qualtrics. I like to start here because if I could sum up the value of Qualtrics and the value that governments get out of Qualtrics in one slide, it would be this one. So we see data as twofold: X data or experience data on the left, and operational data or O data on the right. Now, every government organization that I work with and speak to is typically swimming in operational data. And this data is great. It tells us what is happening in an organization. So depending on the department or function that you're in the county, it might tell you, hey, how many, citizen interactions do we have each year? Or how many programs are we running? Or what do our finance numbers look like? Or if you're in HR, you might know how many employees we have and what the demographics tell us, right? But if we see some type of dip or some type of climb in that operational data, we don't always know why that's happening. And that's where experience data or X data comes in, and Qualtrics can help with that. So X data is more of the human factor. It's more of the customer emotions, sentiment, experience type data that we can get simply from using a tool to digitally connect with the stakeholders that we serve. So that might be after we provide some type of service or have some type of interaction. But the value of Qualtrics is understanding that X data, combining it with operational data so that we can understand what's happening in our organization, why it's happening, and so we can make better data-driven decisions. I wanted to also provide just a really quick kind of overview of the Qualtrics product offerings. So there's a few primary ways that customers, especially in county government, get value out of Qualtrics. One way is many organizations are simply using Qualtrics for ad hoc data collection, analysis, and reporting projects. You'll see some of that from Adam's presentation today. Other organizations are also using Qualtrics to streamline and consolidate their data collection, analysis, and reporting efforts onto one enterprise tool. I hear a lot from a lot of counties that, hey, when it comes to data collection, we use this tool in this department and this other tool in this department and this other tool in this department. And it makes our data kind of siloed and messy. It makes it difficult to really understand the full story that our data is telling us. And so a lot of organizations choose Qualtrics to standardize those efforts around data so that we can better understand, what's happening and why it's happening in our data. A third area that we'll kind of be focusing on today is what we like to call customer experience. So again, this applies whether it's during a pandemic or after a pandemic. And we'll talk a lot about why it's important that governments focus on customer experience. It's a little bit different than why a private sector company would focus on customer experience, right? You guys don't necessarily care quite as much about increasing revenues and profits, but by understanding the experience that we're providing our stakeholders, we can better understand where we need to pool our resources because we'll have a better understanding of what folks care about and what they simply don't care about. And then the last area is employee experience. We won't be spending as much time here today, but if you're in human resources, we would love to connect with you after and talk a little bit about our internal or employee specific programs for things like employee experience, employee engagement, onboarding initiatives, exit interviews, leadership development, et cetera. So again, today we'll be focusing kind of more specifically on this customer experience side. The last piece, just in terms of introductions for us. So Qualtrics actually started in academia. All the major universities across the US and there in Florida use Qualtrics. We work with 80 of the Fortune 100. So a lot of our favorite private sector companies use Qualtrics. And we work with a lot of government entities in Florida. Across the US, we work with about 800 government entities. And here you can see some of the organizations that we work with in Florida. Obviously, we've got Miami-Dade. On the call today, I saw Sandra from Collier County on the call today. Sandra, thanks for joining, and a few other of your neighbors here as well. I wanted to make a point here before passing it over to Vince that Qualtrics is very scalable, and it can be used with large government organizations and very small government organizations. So regardless of the size of your county, your population, the resources that you have, et cetera, Qualtrics can be a really solid tool depending on your use cases and needs, regardless of your size. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Vince, and I'll help drive the slides for you here, Vince, to talk about some of the modernization trends that we're seeing in government today.
Great. Thanks so much, Timon. I just wanted to take a little bit of time to sort of lay the stage before we turn it over to Adam to talk about some of the cool things that Miami-Dade has been doing. I think it's really helpful to sort of understand, right, like overall, what's happening in government, and how does that kind of, where do we fit in that, right? Where do we fit, where does our county fit in that large scale? So I'll first start with the next slide. And this is sort of a metric that all of us here at Qualtrics sort of obsess on, right? And this is trust in government. This is a metric that we've been watching for the last couple of years. And none of this is going to be new to y'all, right? Trust in government has been falling for decades. And when you look at sort of the adaptability of organizations to resident needs, I mean, we're at the bottom of the barrel, right? Like we are like lower than health insurance companies, credit card companies. And so this is a metric that we're really concerned about and trying to work through. How do we improve this? On the next slide, you know, what we've seen is that the way that you impact trust is by focusing on the individual experience that people have with government, right? And that's anything between applying for a permit or calling you up to ask about information. Anytime a resident touches government in some way and has an experience, if that's a really good experience, then we ultimately impact the public trust. People will trust their governments more. And that in turn impacts the large outcomes like that we're trying to impact, right? Like community engagement, health and safety, economic growth. Those outcomes all come from having high levels of government trust. Now, how do you do this though? If you go to the next slide, Timon, we have seen that the biggest difference that a government can take, the biggest thing that they can do to impact public trust is to shift to a digital citizen-centric approach. Now, this is something that isn't new, right? This is, you know, I've been in government for a long time and we've been talking about this my entire career. The difference now is that after the pandemic, or, you know, since the pandemic, I should say, this has greatly accelerated. So we used to have IT transformations, digital transformations that took years, and now they're sort of happening much quicker. And so this is where sort of governments are moving. Now, there's a lot of benefits to moving to a digital citizen-centric approach. On the next slide, I've sort of put a couple different options here, but you know, there are some easy ones, like you actually understand what matters to residents, you improve transparency. But some of the ones that I want to pull your attention to are kind of improving the operational efficiency of your organization, right? Getting digital and becoming citizen-centric doesn't mean that you suddenly have to do more work. And in fact, we've seen time and time again that it actually results in less work, faster processes for governments, no matter how big you are, right? Whether you are a Miami-Dade or whether you are a smaller county, we've sort of seen the same outcomes in all these organizations. And you also sort of reduce the time and cost it takes to serve residents so that you can serve more residents or spend your time with higher level strategic priorities. And so there's a ton of different approaches, right, for a digital citizen-centric approach. Now, on the next slide, you know, it's great for me to say that, right? But it's difficult, right? There's it's not as straightforward, right? As sort of just flipping a switch. We see that 80% of government officials believe their agencies are not as technologically advanced as it needs to be in order to serve today's residents, right? Especially considering the pandemic, where so many folks transition to digital channels for everything, for their bank transactions, for ordering food, ordering groceries. That same mentality of like, oh, I need to look digital whenever I need something is being extended to government. So it's going to be very difficult for us to switch and move in the direction that we need to move in order to meet our citizens' expectations. Timon, if you click one more time, we'll see that we have seen 60% of government agencies reporting an acceleration in this digital transformation, and I'm willing to bet that this is happening in your counties as well, where we're starting to get a little smarter and faster about, okay, we really need to sort of step up our technology game in order to serve residents where they are today. Now, again, there's some challenges, right? We see that there's sort of a culture of risk aversion, of course, kind of government-wide. It's pretty common no matter what sort of new initiative you're putting out there. There is, we have some legacy technology and we have some in-house technology that can be really difficult to work around. When I was in government, I was always kind of stressed about these projects because they were so big, they were so costly, and I couldn't wrap my head around them. I didn't know where to start. I worked for a lot of smaller jurisdictions and smaller counties, and I would always hear these great stories, but just not know where to start, right? Like I wouldn't have the same level of resources to kind of start major programs like this. And so these are some of the challenges that we've typically seen in government. And today what we want to do is sort of walk through, and what Adam's going to do is walk through some of the things, big and small, that Miami-Dade actually put into effect, and kind of give you a starting place, right? No matter how big your county is or what resources you have or how many people you have on individual teams, that's the part that always kind of stuck with me when I was in government is I really want to know where to start if I don't have a full team or if I don't have tons of resources. And so that is a big challenge of modernization and innovation. And we're hoping that we can provide a little bit of some solutions to that problem today as well. And so hopefully that helped with just providing kind of, a lay of the land of sort of what's happening in government. If some of these trends are familiar to you, I hope they're familiar to you, just know that you're not alone, right? Like we're all trying to figure this out together. Every single government we talk to across the country is having these issues. And so where we really want to help is providing you stories and providing you sort of best practices and examples of other governments that have done this work, so that you can sort of take some nuggets and cautiously plant them and see if they would work in your organization as well. So with that, Adam, I'm going to sort of hand it over to you and talk a little bit about Miami-Dade and some of the cool stuff that you're doing over there.
That's me. Since we're all Florida people, I think we can skip over how wonderful Miami-Dade County is. We all love Florida and we know how great it is, so we can go through there. One thing I would like to point out is just when people think of Miami-Dade County, the first thing that pops in their head is South Beach and Miami. And just to let everyone know, once again, preaching to the choir, because we're all Florida people, that we also have a huge agriculture community, and we have Everglades and natural resources and other things that we're trying to protect. We're just not the beach. So, and jump into the presentation. So we wanted to break this up into two main flavors of how we use Qualtrics. We have the traditional use of Qualtrics, and we have the evolving use of Qualtrics. The traditional is just put a survey out there, get some satisfaction, maybe do something with the satisfaction scores that we're getting. Hopefully we analyze the data, improve a service, or help someone out with something. And then the evolving is these new problems that are popping up, that the unanticipated, the problems that just you could never plan for, like, I don't know, a pandemic, to where you just completely shift the way you do everything, and that you have done everything forever. And to find the quick and easy, not 6 years with an RFP and a 6-year implementation and the millions of dollars of budgets, you just need to get it done. So that's the evolving use of Qualtrics for us. So we'll start in the traditional part of our department. The Communications and Experience Management Department is the 311 call center. We take all incoming government calls, and we try to either answer, create a service request, or find out who can do what we need to help serve our customer. We also have Miami-Dade.gov, and we have a few other digital channels, an iPhone app, and other ways to intake service. And as we need to get more digital, we need more service channels. So that's just one of the challenges that we already spoke about today. But one of the big services that we have are bulky waste. Bulky waste, if you don't know, we every resident has two or three bulky waste that they can put a large pile of garbage along the side of the road and request for Miami-Dade County to come pick it up. We've been doing it forever, but we just don't really know how we do. So before someone would request a service, they would go to the website, they would call us or use our app. 311 would schedule it with the department that picks up the waste, and then nothing happened. We don't know if we did great. We don't know if we did poorly. We don't know if we even picked up the garbage unless someone calls us back and complains. So our perception of the service was basically on anecdotal information or the gut impression. And usually with that, it's the squeaky wheel. The person that got poor service is the one complaining to us. So we had a perception that this was not a well-received service. So there's always talks about redesigning it, redoing it, re-engineering it, completely tearing it down and building it up from the bottom. But before we did that, we wanted to evaluate and see what would happen. So this is where we put in our follow-up surveys. So now the resident will submit the standard, same way they've always done, through our 311 contact center, through our iPhone or web apps. It gets scheduled with the department, and instead of going to the ether, it now, when the service is complete, the resident will get a survey. And the survey will just ask a few basic questions. How well do we do handling your request? How hard or difficult was it to set up your request? Was the area left neat and clean? And was it done within the promised time frame? Simple questions, takes 3 or 4 minutes. And it was just amazingly well received. And then the close the loop part came in. This is where we took those responses, and if a user had a poor reaction to a service and it was our fault, and I really want to say our fault, like if a user complained that our garbage truck was stinky, that's just something that we can't deal with. But if the truck accidentally ran over your mailbox or dented your car, which I don't think has happened, that's something that we need to call and follow up with the resident. So closing the loop is where we evaluate the responses that we receive, and based on some automations and some magic in the background, we can determine if it's an angry customer or not. It's actually pretty easy. We just look at the Net Promoter Score, which is one of the questions. But and then those create a ticket in Qualtrics, and a customer service rep at the service providing department, in this case, solid waste, will get a ticket to contact the resident. And the resident will then, here's the ticket, I hope you can see it. The resident will then get a call from us or an email or whatever we can contact you with at the time. And they're absolutely shocked. When we first kicked it off, the program, they were amazed that they submitted this, in this exact quote, this stupid survey that they knew nothing would happen. And then a guy named James called them right away. And then a guy named Robert followed up with them. So now this, instead of being the blob of Miami-Dade County, this entity that doesn't like have a face or this anything, now it's Robert and James that is helping them with their problem. And sometimes we can solve the problem, sometimes it's out of our control, but at least they know someone cares. And it just really bought us a lot of goodwill, if not anything else. And then you can see from our scores in the background, this is a Net Promoter Score, and we'll get into the other scores later. Anything above a 0 is considered pretty good, and we're cruising at 81.5. So from service through perception, we thought wasn't fantastic. We're actually doing amazing. So it's just through a simple little survey, we found out we're doing great. We don't need to completely tear down and re-engineer a service. We bought a ton of goodwill, and the person that what happened here? They destroyed their lawn, is now happy. So it's just a whole lot of goodwill, and I don't want to say kill birds with one stone, but we definitely killed a whole lot of birds with one stone from just a simple survey and a follow-up. And so that's why we do it. It helps us understand the stakeholders. So sometimes we do things and we don't even know who we're doing it for. So by actually breaking down the service and measuring the experiences, we understand who are the stakeholders, the residents, of course, the 311 support specialists that are taking the request, the service provider, the person, us at communications, we're not driving the trucks picking up the bulky waste. So the service providers are involved. And then, of course, the government officials who put their name on the product. And at the end of the day, if something goes really poorly, they're the first line of, I don't want to say defense, but first line of criticism when it does go bad. And we also, it allows us to have multiple feedback mechanisms through what we're doing. We have the real-time, all of these available dashboards and the ticket systems with the closed loop that allows us. The measures that we use, Net Promoter Score, when we first started, was a big Qualtrics metric. And when we first started, there weren't many government clients. So Net Promoter Score is a very private sector. It's a great score. If you ever stayed at a hotel or flew on an airplane, and 2 years ago, it's the how well do you recommend this product to a friend or colleague? And if you give it a high score, a 9 or 10, you're a promoter. If it gives something below a 6 is a failing score on the scale from 0 to 10. You're a distractor. And you just want to keep everyone promoting, saying good things about you. So that's why we started with a Net Promoter Score. As we got into the program, we realized that we realized, and we had comments from the citizens, that this is kind of a stupid metric, once again, exact quote, because who the heck else are we going to go to? So we got thinking, we worked with Qualtrics, we worked with some other people in the government industry, and we loved the stat that was coming out of the city of Orlando. It's a trust score. So now on services that we aren't a monopoly, we still use Net Promoter Score. So our golf courses, we have competition with golf courses. So we will ask you, do you recommend our golf courses? But for services where we are a monopoly and there's no real logical competition for us, we asked, how much do you trust or distrust Miami-Dade County with your service? And we'll see later when I go into the live demo, we ran them in parallel for a long time. To half the respondents were getting the Net Promoter Score and half were getting the trust. And it seemed to, within a couple points, match each other. So it seems to work out very well for us. Another very self-serving score is the customer effort score. As the communications experience management department, we are the intake for a vast majority of county services. So we want to know how well we're doing. Is the process easy? Are there any barriers or sticky points to make it difficult for you to request a service with Miami-Dade County? And through the score, we've identified some issues with our iPhone app and rewrote the way that the iPhone app processes something to greatly enhance the speed. And then we saw the iPhone app channel went back on par as a very well-received measure for effort. And then finally, the customer satisfaction. Just the standard, how satisfied are you with the service? From extremely dissatisfied to extremely satisfied. It's a really easy question to put together. It's a really easy question to score. And just each answer gets a point and the most points win. So it's another very easy but useful measure. So that's the traditional side of Qualtrics. That's what we've been doing for years and years and years, 3 years now, I think. And it's old hat for us. It's pretty much all automated. We get a report from our 311 reporting system. It dumps it into a folder. The Qualtrics automation grabs the people to contact, and it all just happens, except for the customer service part. That's the human part, but I don't do that. And now to the evolving part. The part where you need something quick and easy. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it just needs to solve the problem at hand. And during these past 16 months, 14 months, there's been a lot of problems at hand that just needed a solution, and it needed to happen immediately. And two of them we'll get into. The first one was the Miami-Dade County Transit's Lost and Found program. And the second one will be the office hoteling program, and I'll get into those much more in depth right now. So the Miami-Dade County Transit Lost and program allows users to report items that they've lost to transit, and if a transit worker finds it, it reports that it's been found. And just so you can see that we lose a lot of items. On average, 94 items are lost per month, including 72 bikes over the past 2 years, which really confuses me how you lose a bike, but it happens a lot. So just a little deep dive into the program. On miamidade.gov, there is a report lost and found item with a big box that says report a lost and found item, and that loads up a Qualtrics survey. The survey allows the writer to identify what they've lost, when they lost, what mode of transportation that they were on, whether it be our bus, our rail, or our autonomous metro mover, and what route, what time of day, so that it just gives the transit staff a fighting chance to actually find the item. When they submit it, a ticket is created to our Lost and Found program, and a transit employee now has a record of each item that is lost, and this one is a fake user that lost a bicycle. And the ticket also has a few follow-up questions. Was the user contacted? Was the item found? And was the item returned to the user? Very simple. So if a transit employee finds this fake user's bike, they will click yes. This was found. The user would get an email, and they could come into the office to pick up their bicycle. Now comes a pandemic, and there's social distancing, and we can't have many people in the office. We're running very few people in the office as it is. So we need to find a way to not make anyone overlap at the office. So we did a quick edit to the system. We now, when the item is discovered, they'll get an email saying your item has been marked as found with a link saying schedule a lost and found appointment. The user clicks that, and it loads up a Qualtrics form with all the appointments that are available for the upcoming week or that coming week. And once they select a time slot, that time slot is removed from any subsequent loads of that form, so that we can't have two people in the 10:30 a.m. time slot. They select their time, and then they get a confirmation email letting them know where to go, what time, and who to contact if they have any issues. So it was a big problem, and it was just the creation of one extra form and a couple of logical steps in the background to fix the problem. It's not a permanent solution. Hopefully in the very near future, we can allow anyone to come in whenever, when this is all over, and this just goes away. Because it definitely, there's some manual processes every week. A user needs to go in and reset the calendar for the next week. But it was a quick solution to a very needed problem. And the exact same thing with the office hoteling program. Now that the vast majority of the county workforce, the office workforce, is working from home, including myself right now inside my son's Lego room, we all are learned how to work from home, but occasionally we need to go into an office with a conference room, a cubicle, a quiet space, and to just boost our productivity or get us some collaboration that's just much needed. So our buildings are full of empty spaces, and we have staff members that might need to fill them. So how do we match the empty space to the human? Once again, Qualtrics comes in. So we have a simple survey asking a couple personal questions like who you are, what department you work for, and then some details about what you need. Do you need an individual cubicle? Do you need a conference room or an open collaboration space? And if you need a cubicle, how many do you need? So a fairly simple form. This simple form sends out an email to the administrator of the program. It creates another ticket showing you the user that created the form and all the details about the request. If the cubicle needs a virtual, a regular PC, no PC, how many people in the conference room, just all the details, what date, of course, and who to contact. So that's where Qualtrics stops managing stuff. They have a separate spreadsheet on the side with all the inventory of the office spaces and availability. So if cubicle 5 is full today, they can see that cubicle 6 is available. So inside this form, there's a check box that says request approved, yes or no. If there's space, it'll be approved. And then what cubicle is assigned to you or what conference room. So all the user has to do is look up their inventory, say yes, type it in, click submit. When that happens, an email is sent to the requester, letting them know that their request has been approved and all the important details about it. So the reservation date, the cubicle number, and all the rules of the program. So we're still following social distancing rules and what can and cannot be brought into the office. And at the bottom, which I cut off, most importantly, is how to use the printer, because no one can seem to ever figure out how to use a printer. So Qualtrics didn't solve all of the problems, but it provided a quick solution to get the request in and let the requester know. I tried very hard to manage the inventory, and it was just way too complex for Qualtrics or my brain to figure out. But if this becomes a very successful program, then we know we need to actually get a proper office hoteling management software. But for now, Qualtrics is doing a great job proving that this is a viable pilot. And something that just launched today is now we know who is in each office each day. So the day after, the user will get a satisfaction survey to see how well they like the ISD hoteling program. Were there problems? Did it meet all their needs? Did they have any technical issues? And things such as that, so that now we are getting satisfaction for the program itself. And of course, we ask, how is the booking process? Because that's the part I care about. And early in the presentation, we talked about how to start this thing. And the 5-year software, the big custom builds, and the boiling the oceans, and the horribleness of every software project that probably all of us have ever dealt with throughout our career. And I just want to recommend to do the exact opposite with this. Start small, start incredibly small, pick one thing and do it well. And when you're choosing a service provider, if it's not from your own department, choose a quote unquote friendly one, because there will be mistakes. There definitely will be mess ups. And we all know that there's some departments that can tolerate a mistake or two and some that can't. So we don't want a missed comma or a wrongly spelled word or an email that gets on the wrong date to absolutely torpedo your program at the very start. So just someone with some flexibility that can grow with you through the program. Another important, use Qualtrics automations. I've had it for a long time, and the 4 hours it took me to learn it saved me almost an hour every day. And that was 2 years ago. So it's just a little bit of investment in the front end can save a ton of time. And another is pick the right services with enough data. We started with listing our top 10 services that 311 takes in, with the first one being bulky waste. We did it, worked great. The second one was a animal services animal complaint. So we started the whole process with the survey, got everything. And then when we went to go send it out to people, we realized that there's no data for people that submitted complaints, because that's a quote unquote tattletale service and everyone submits it anonymously, and no one wants to know that their neighbor's complaining about their barking dog. So we had enough volume in the service, but we didn't have enough contacts to actually contact the service. And there's the other way around, where we have 100% people that provide their contacts, but we only get 4 submissions a year. So make sure you have enough data from both sides of the service spectrum, like the volume of the service being requested, and actually enough contact data to reach out to the resident post service delivery. And finally, adjust your metrics as needed. Like we discussed, we're transitioning away from Net Promoter Score to a trust framework with some of our questions. It just makes a lot more sense. And we honestly have been called out by numerous survey respondents that how stupid of a question this was. So we don't want to be, I don't want to look stupid to our residents. So we adjusted, and now we have the trust framework. And that's it. I know I flew through it. I want to give enough time for questions and a demo if anyone wants to see anything. So please, I do a lot better with people asking me questions, so ask away. And one other thing, the beauty of working with government and working with governments is we don't have the quote unquote secret sauce. This is our real data I have right here on the screen. And when I started, it was the Fortune 100s weren't very forthcoming with their how they did something or why they're doing it. So a lot of the secret sauce we had to develop ourselves, and I don't want anyone to go through the growing pains. So that's why I'm here today, and we'll happily discuss this with anyone that wants to talk to me afterwards. So please let me know.
Adam, we got a question that was in the chat, and it's, I think I got a complimentary question to it, but it says, you know, how do you deal with a non-digital citizen? And I know I had a question for Hyman, I think last week when we met, was how do you make sure that your responses aren't skewed to those that are either super digital savvy or those who normally, for lack of a better word, would kind of participate in these type of surveys, whereas, you know, a lot of people probably won't.
So the non-digital people, I might get dinged for this. We don't have a massive digital divide. When we study down in Miami-Dade County, most of our residents have at a minimum a cell phone where they can access miamidade.gov or survey or text messaging or something to that effect. So we're able to reach a lot of our residents through digital mediums, but there also are, when we were allowed to touch things in public, we had kiosks. We were just starting to set up some kiosks where you could create a service at the service point, like quite literally like 3 weeks. It was February of 2020 where we started it. So I don't have much data to discuss on how they worked out, other than now they look like germ-infested things that no one wants to get near. So hopefully we can revisit the actual kiosk with an iPad and a little secure enclosure to upload survey data.
So what about, now I love my in-laws, I really do, but they're 82 and they can do two things well. One, they go on cruises all the time when we weren't in a pandemic. And number two, they can Facebook like no one's business. So is that kind of, that's where you would capture that audience, that my father-in-law is not going to use a cell phone or probably a kiosk because he's just not that savvy. But Facebook is something they use 10 times a day. And I'm wondering if that is a way to kind of capture that audience. And I think they're an important part, you know, they're retired, they're taxpayers, and they got time to either trash the local government or sing its praises.
So that's a blessing and a curse kind of thing for us, where we do have the ability to distribute some things directly to your Facebook feed, but then we become creepy big government that we know who you are and are directly interacting on your Facebook feed. So we tread very, very lightly on things like that. Yeah. We don't necessarily push much individualized messages unless you ask us first. So if you ask us a question through Twitter, we'll respond through, I don't know, I think it's called direct message. through Twitter or Facebook, the chat, but we really don't physically push much out. So that definitely might be a deficiency that we have, that we're not capturing. While we have people with actual technology, the devices, we might not, some of them aren't using them. So yes, definitely a good question.
And I want to ask you about the efficiencies, productivity versus, I don't want to say versus, but in addition to customer satisfaction. So I took note of what you said, that you earned goodwill by that one person who responded back, which is awesome, which is what you want. But then I also heard and saw on the slide, you're saving time. 4 hours invested in this saves you an hour a day. What does that look like internally in terms of, and I don't know if you can quantify it, you can certainly feel it if you are spending less time chasing down someone's complaint.
Okay. A really good example, I'll use COVID because that's an example we use for everything, is for Fema reimbursements. After a COVID test, we needed to have an audit of a certain percentage of the tests that we submitted. And we're doing hundreds of thousands of tests a week at one point. And we would, before it got to my ear, there were actually, in our fire department, we're handling Office of Emergency Management, we're handling testing and the whole testing infrastructure. So they were actually using firefighters to call people to say, well, did you receive a test on this day? Yes or no? And at this location, yes or no? Okay, call the next person. And luckily, it was very early in the process that I heard about this. So I just said, hey, we have the mobile number, which was a requirement, and or the email address for each of these people. I can send out within 5 minutes a survey to all 100,000 of these people and get the answers for you. So within 5 minutes, I sent 100,000 surveys and got a really good response rate, like well more than needed for the audit requirements, and prevented a lot of first responders from sitting at a desk calling people individually.
That's awesome. So what about just as an internal tool that, and maybe Timon, you can answer this if you know some other communities that have done this, where they have, I'm head of a department or I'm a deputy director of a department, and we know that we've gotten just beat up because of the quality of service or lack of quality of service. And we saw that, and we saw those metrics, and then, we made some changes. And so internally, it's that person's supervisor, that person's supervisor. You can see where I'm going with this. How can you use that as an internal tool to evaluate?
Of course.
Yeah.
So another service that we do, we have green and blue cards for recycling and garbage respectively. And if you have a damaged cart, you can call 311 or through all of our other channels, request a replacement cart. And I didn't really get into this in the back-end metadata of Qualtrics. Like every survey has a ton of data in the back end of it, of who the respondent is. And the file that I received from our 311 system tells everything there is, like the commission district, you can see some of it on the screen right now, like what telephone method, what commission district. And one of those was route number for our green cart request. And there's one particular route that is just far and away worse than every other one. And we can use that data to identify why does this particular route, are the people lazy? Are they not doing it? It turns out they didn't have the gate code for the complex, but it's just so you can find out where your deficiencies are at a very micro level, or you can look at the whole program as the macro level to find the macro satisfaction as a whole or individual entities. So this, where I'm kind of highlighting right now, in the promoter score per commission district, we have 13 different districts represented by different commissioners throughout the county. And we can see through these geographic ranges where different promoter scores are. The lowest one, they don't really even have very much service area. There's 234 replies, or the highest one, some of these have a whole lot more. I think this one has 1,600 replies. So the data is a little bit skewed because there's not much, we don't really service these districts, but we can definitely break down the data. If we have the data, we can report on it.
Adam, I think one thing to add on there too, that you told me, I think it was last week, is that when you first started this program, you were kind of expecting to just have like an onslaught of negative feedback, but it wasn't necessarily the case, right? I don't know if you want to expand a little bit on that, but I thought that was an interesting insight.
Of course, like we talked earlier that we expected, and that's part of the friendly department, friendly service provider that, you know, is willing to get their roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty in the process, because it might uncover some skeletons that you don't want to see. And so it's really important to go into it with an open mind that we might unearth some bad information, and being that we're government, everything we unearth is publicly available to whomever wants to see it. So there's no way to cover it up, so we just need to deal with it. And so luckily with this service, we're far and away surpassing national average, national customer service averages and whatnot. Our customer effort score is 90, or it's from -100 to 100. We consistently stay good. This one thing is a hurricane where we didn't run the service during, I can't remember which hurricane it was at this point. Our satisfactions are 95% for, was it done in the time frame, and 96 was it neat and clean. And our happy customers comments are almost 11,500, where the angries are 600. And so it's just, there's a chance, and hopefully it's not bad, but there's definitely a chance that it's bad. And we just need to sell that as an opportunity instead of a deficiency, because if it's bad regardless if we know it's bad or not. But if we know it's bad, then we can find out why it's bad and hopefully fix it.
So, Timon, we're kind of hitting the top of the hour, but I wanted, you and I had a conversation before we started the webinar about some of the new stimulus money and some of the reporting and accountability. And the question is whether or not some of the services that your company provides would be eligible under the new stimulus funding.
Yes, that's a great question, Eric. The short answer is yes. I think there are still some kind of question marks for most folks in terms of, hey, how exactly can we use that new stimulus money once we receive it? And so we're kind of still pending that information too. But over the last year or so, a lot of government entities have used stimulus money like CARES funding, and we're anticipating to be able to use the ARPA funding for Qualtrics, depending on the use case. So a lot of organizations have used it in public health related instances. I know a big focus for this most recent round of stimulus funding is to improve, economic sufficiency and economic growth and development. And so those are a few things to keep in mind, and we would be happy to chat more, but we anticipate there will be a lot of use cases where you could use that new funding for a tool like Qualtrics.
Great. Well, gentlemen, we're about 3 minutes from the top of the hour, and I don't think we have any more questions in the chat. Probably my last question for Timon would be just in terms of scalability. So Miami-Dade is over 2 million people. I've got members whose counties you probably know are anywhere between 7,000 and 9,000.
Yeah.
And they may want to use this just in one department that's important to them, whether it's, road grading or something like that, or solid waste. Mm-hmm. How scalable is this tool?
Yep. It's extremely scalable. So to that point, based on your population, based on your size, based on your use cases, our pricing and packages are scalable to meet those needs. So, you can start very, very small and still have a really good package to meet those needs. And so that's something that, through a couple of conversations, we can scope out. But the tool and the associated pricing are extremely scalable for large and small counties alike.
Vince, Adam, Timon, thank you so much for coming on today. This was very fascinating because everyone says, you gotta, well, not everybody, but people often say, government ought to be run more like a business. And that's not really possible given just the way the function and role of government. But I mean, it seems to me that you guys have put in some business practices that I think a local government could actually copy and really improve upon. So appreciate you guys coming on today and taking the time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
To our fellow government people, I do mean it. We're here to help if you guys need it. So please reach out.
All right. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, everybody.